Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Josh, and before I get into this week's case, just to let you all know, at the moment Tanya is taking a little break, so not to worry though, she's doing good. I'll try my best to man the ship solo for as long as necessary. Although that said, I'm not really manning the ship solo today because I invited one of my friends to join in. So with that said, hello Lorena.
Hey!
Howdy doody.
I'm good. I'm socially awkward.
Socially awkward even to the microphone.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it won't talk back.
It's giving the Truman Show. Anyways.
I don't know what that is.
It's, oh my god, you don't know what that is?
No.
It's like a movie about this fella, right? And he is like going about his life, but he doesn't realise he's actually in a movie. And then he's like slowly realising that he's actually a part of a movie. That's like the weirdest explanation I've ever done.
No, but I get what you
he's
mean.
like slowly
He's
realising
convinced
that
that he's
everyone
living
around
his
him is
life.
acting.
Yeah.
That everyone around him is acting, and he's like figuring it out as he goes along. It's really good.
I might have to watch
It's kind of
that.
scary though.
As is
It
life.
it does give you a bit of paranoia, like.
Right.
So that's that.
I'll
That's
watch
me.
that on a good day.
Yeah.
So, with that little announcement and introduction done, this week I am covering the case of Richard Trenton Chase, or more commonly known as the Vampire of Sacramento, or also the Dracula Killer. Chase murdered at least 6 people and would drink the blood of his victims, but we'll get into that later.
Nice.
For now, let's start at the beginning. Yeah, I prefer a bit of red wine myself.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a lie. I prefer white.
Yeah, I'm a white girl. Anyways.
Oh. For the record, Lorena's half Brazilian. That's why that was funny.
Yeah.
For those of you
I
that
forget
don't know
people
her.
can't see me.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on after that awkward silence that we just left. So anyway, just to we'll start from the beginning, obviously. Duh. Not going to go from the end backwards. But trigger warning. My brain is not well.
Trigger evening more like.
Yeah, trigger warning for murder, abuse, animal abuse, and to be honest, there's probably more than just them. So just be prepared, and if you think it's too much at any point, join in for next week's episode and give this one a miss, unless you're Lorena, you're trapped in the car with me.
Yeah, traumatized.
But, so, let's get into the case. Are you excited?
So excited.
So, Richard Trenton Chase was born on the 23rd of May, 1950 in Santa Clara County, California, to Richard Chase Sr. and Beatrice Chase. His father worked as a computer specialist and his mother was a teacher. Now, Chase was abused from an early age by his parents, who were described as strict and dominating. Chase's parents dished out punishments regularly. I guess also given the times that we're going back to the 50s, I feel like that was not meaning that it's okay, but I feel like domestic abuse and abuse between of children and like men abusing their wives and stuff like that and things like that was very slipped under the rug, not talked about, and get on with it.
That's my nanny's era.
So, for example, like this one is awful. When Chase was only 2 years old, his father force-fed him until he vomited.
Jesus Christ.
Like, that's trauma from an early age.
Oh my god.
When Chase was 3 years old, his family moved into a house in Sacramento, and the next year his sister Pamela was born. Now, Chase was popular with his peers, and his teachers described him as a sweet child, so he was well liked by his teachers. Pamela Chase, his sister, later recalled confrontations between Chase and their father, Richard Sr., where Richard Sr. would shake Chase or throw him against the wall.
Oh my god.
It's also said that Richard Sr. was emotionally abusive and would yell at Chase whenever he made any sort of mistake. Now, Richard Sr. also had difficulty managing money and was an alcoholic. Therefore, Chase's parents also had problems within their marriage. They would frequently fight loudly and in front of Chase and his sister. Now, obviously, I'm referring to Richard Trenton Chase as Chase, so that when I refer to Richard Sr., it's more clear.
Yeah.
So, Chase's mother, Beatrice, was also prone to accusing her husband of using dope and trying to poison her.
Oh my god.
So obviously she probably had some underlying issues as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I suppose if you're in that kind of environment, it's definitely going to draw it out of you as well.
Yeah.
It's
giving generational trauma.
Yeah. And as time went on, Beatrice started to accuse her husband of cheating with their neighbours. Too busy with their own marital issues, Richard Sr. and Beatrice paid little attention to Chase, who was a quiet child but began to behave strangely. At 10 years of age, Chase developed an interest in dead animals. He enjoyed killing and torturing cats that he found around the neighbourhood.
Nah.
And Chase was intrigued by their blood and insides. At 10. Chase later began to kill birds, rabbits and dogs as well. It got to a stage where Chase had killed so many stray cats that the neighbours actually noticed that the cats were suddenly vanishing.
The woman was too stunned to speak.
Yeah,
Oh my
it's shocking.
God.
Like, I'm like, I found like, obviously the whole case is rough and awful
Yeah.
because, like, as I'll get into, there's mental health at play here. It's the 50s, 60s, 70s. The help that is there now wasn't there then.
Yeah.
Not excusing anything that he turned out doing, but there's a lot at play. Everything was awful about this.
Yeah,
between his mental health in it, between the animal abuse, what he did, the whole thing is just brutal.
It's a
All
different
from all
world then,
angles.
like, compared to what it is now as
Yeah.
well. Like, a lot of things
And
are
even now, in most
dismissed.
countries, there is still so much room for improvement.
Yeah.
But compared to back then,
Yeah.
it's completely different. Beatrice once found one of the cats buried in the soil amongst her flowers. Home life only continued to get worse in the Chase household, and when Chase was 12 years old, his parents' fighting had gotten very bad, and his mother saw 2 different psychiatrists for emotional issues. When Chase was 13 years old, the family actually lost the house due to financial difficulties that they were having, and of course Chase was still showing concerning behaviour. At some point, when Chase was around 13, he experienced one of his earliest breaks from reality. Chase became convinced that he was a member of the James Younger gang, a gang of outlaws from the 19th century that included Jesse James, an infamous bank and train robber, and no doubt guilty of more, but that's a potential case to cover another time. This case isn't about Jesse James. Chase had had a poster made of the gang that also had his picture stuck onto it, and would repeatedly ask his mother to get him a cowboy hat, like he believed he was part of this gang.
Oh my God.
From the 19th century. Chase developed other strange habits, such as burning pans when trying to make food for himself in the middle of the night, leave puddles on the kitchen floor, and made messes that he made no effort to clean up. Now, that last part about making messes and not cleaning might have been strange behaviour then, but it doesn't sound so strange to me these days, to be honest.
Definitely not.
But anyway, there were other times where Chase would turn the heating in the house up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius whenever he was alone, and he would just strip and stay on the couch in the living room for the night.
Fair enough.
I mean...
Wow. That's
Okay.
very warm.
That is, isn't it, like? Chase also enjoyed playing with matches and would frequently start small fires. So there's that. Despite being in his teens, Chase was also still wetting the bed.
Oh no. You think somebody would have noticed? Like, it's actually really sad.
Yeah. Now, time to bring up the McDonald triad. This points to animal cruelty, fire setting and bedwetting in childhood being indicative of aggressive and violent behaviour in adulthood. Researchers refer to this triad as a precursor to antisocial behaviours, including serial and sexual murder. Chase checked every box in the triad, and only 2 of 3 need to be met to be predictive of violent tendencies.
Oh my God.
Now, whether the McDonald triad is to be taken at face value is controversial. Not everyone agrees with it, and I'm not sure myself where I stand with it, but it is interesting that a lot of serial killers and such do tick those boxes. However, I think, could there not be thousands or even millions of people out there who, you know, could have ticked those boxes in their childhood, and we just don't know about it because they've never committed any violent acts to end up in the news, or were never psychologically evaluated. Therefore, how can we really know how indicative the McDonald triad is of people growing up to be violent? Because we're only going to hear of the ones that did meet it.
Yeah.
What about all the ones that met that criteria and never did anything out of place a day in their lives?
Yeah.
They're just living their life. And so I feel like that's definitely something that needs further research and case studies and like a very wide net of participants.
Yeah.
That was me earlier.
There'd have to be like a spectrum to it almost.
Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they'd need more than just, oh, he did these 3 things.
Yeah.
Psychopath. Do you know what I mean? So, where was I? Oh yeah, so when Chase was in the middle of 9th grade, which would have meant he was around 14 or 15 years old, his parents separated and his mother Beatrice took Chase, why did I say it like that? Sounded like something out of Emmerdale all of a sudden. Took Chase and his sister Pamela to live with relatives in Los Angeles. However, only 8 days after the move, Richard Sr. followed them, intent on bringing Chase back to Sacramento. Now, the way Richard Sr. treated his family, especially Chase, why did he even want to bring Chase back? Was it because he gave a shit or just needed someone living with him to abuse?
Yeah.
Now, as we go further into the case, I don't, and you'll probably all notice, I don't really hear abuse from the dad as much, so maybe at some point he got his shit together. So when I said not giving a shit, I'm on about this moment in time, not going forward, because later on in the case he seemed more concerned than the mother did.
Yeah.
But we'll get to there. Where was it? Like, yeah, why did he even want to bring Chase? Was it because he gave shit, or he just needed someone with him to kind of take his shit? Now, anyway, Chase ended up back in Sacramento with Richard Sr., and 4 months later, Beatrice and Pamela returned home too. So they came back.
Okay.
Now, back in school, Chase did not seem to have any problems fitting in. He took care of himself, he was popular enough, and went on dates with girls. There were 2 girls that Chase more seriously dated, one of which the relationship lasted a year, but both relationships he'd had ultimately ended as he could not keep an erection. So Chase was attracted to women, but when it came to sex, it just wouldn't work. So
Yeah.
Chase was chronically underweight, and he was impotent, and he was obviously humiliated. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he was skinny, he couldn't get it up.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. And, like, there's no shame in it.
And it's a lot to take.
A lot of people do suffer from
like,
it, but when you're that young, it's puberty, it's the prime time to get bullied.
Yeah, and it's all like your friends are all like, oh, look at me, like I'm the big man, like.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh.
I'm like, how do you even 1950s that? Like, what would they have said in the 1950s instead of like, I am a big man? Do you know the way they be on about...
Dear sir, I'm so great. I don't know, I'll have to ask my nan.
I have pounded much this week. Hath thou ever pounded? I had to pause to make a little edit, but we're back. So Chase's erectile dysfunction became an obsession for him throughout his life, and it began another delusion. Well, I don't know if that began, but another delusion did begin. And in his mind, yes, it was because of that. Backtracking. In his mind, the erectile dysfunction was due to a lack of blood, and to fix it, he needed to drink the blood of animals.
Oh my god.
Yes. So Chase was still popular enough to get invited to parties, and he began to drink often. Bear in mind, man is about 14, 15-ish. At one of the parties, he drank too much and began to behave erratically. He ran down the street screaming and making noises, but nobody could understand anything that was coming out of his mouth. A concerned friend brought him home, and Chase confided in his friend about his erectile dysfunction, as it was taking more of a toll on him than he was letting on. Understandable.
Which is so fair,
Not understandable enough, but that was a delusion, so anyway. Another factor that was not helping Chase was his drug use. Chase had started to experiment with cannabis, but also took large amounts of LSD and amphetamines.
Sorry, in this day and age, I didn't even know these things like this existed.
Yeah. They're around a long time, like, because like all the hippies and stuff as well, when you remember, like, whenever
you
that
just
was.
don't even
but you don't think about it back then.
That's mad.
Yeah. It just seems so, like, it just seems weird when you think back then.
It feels wrong.
You think of all, like, the good things, I guess,
yeah,
that
like
are
the
shown
men in the
from
suits
then.
And the women in the little
nobody
dresses
thinks,
and the little
nobody
heels
really
and
thinks too much about all the negatives and the bad.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, unless it's terms of like racism, homophobia, and stuff.
Well,
obviously,
yeah.
that's a big thing.
That's given.
So on and so forth. But so Chase was now a moody teen who spent his time with acid heads and showed no remorse or guilt for stealing from neighbours or hurting animals. So he was no longer this, sweet,
nice boy
that his teachers had described him as and whatnot. In 1965, when Chase was 15, he had his first quarrel with the law for possession of cannabis. Chase denied taking drugs. However, the juvenile court ordered him to do community cleanup work on weekends. Richard Sr. had not hired a lawyer to defend Chase, and this made Chase more upset, causing him to resent his family even more. I'm like, why would you need a lawyer over a bit of community service at the weekend? Like, yeah, I know it's a bit dampener on your weekend, like, but
it's a bit of cleaning,
anyway,
like, chores.
So Chase's grades in school began to decline, and he no longer cared about school. Nothing seemed to matter to him except for drugs and blood. Chase did still manage to graduate from Mira Loma High School in June of 1968 and was now 18 years old, and his parents purchased a Volkswagen for him as a gift, like I suppose graduation gift.
Yeah.
Then moving on to kind of like...
I wouldn't expect that considering his dad hated him, like.
Yeah, so I'm assuming maybe things improved or something.
Yeah,
I don't
probably.
fucking know, but like... Anyway, moving on. So he's 18 now, so we're kind of going into early adulthood. Richard was still suffering from erectile dysfunction, and it was causing him so much distress that he actually went to get help from a psychiatrist. Now, he was also looking for help as his own emotional instability was even concerning him, not just the erectile dysfunction. Financial difficulties and his parents still constantly fighting added to his stress. The psychiatrist did suspect that Chase was mentally ill, but not enough to need intervention. Chase was told that his erectile dysfunction was likely caused by an emotional issue such as anxiety or a repressed rage towards women.
Oh.
However, none of this was much help to Chase, as he still believed his body was low on blood.
Oh God. I feel like, you know, when you're young and like you see somebody and you're trying to tell them things, you don't really tell them everything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I feel
because
like
I'd like to think if he did
like,
mention the fixation on blood, that if that therapist didn't intervene or do something, there's severe negligence there.
Yeah, 100%.
So obviously, as time went by, Chase suffered in silence. He grew his hair long and started to neglect his personal hygiene, causing him to look dishevelled all the time, basically. He began to pull away from people more and more, becoming very withdrawn from others, and his friends stopped calling by to see him. Chase's father, Richard Sr., was concerned, but his mother, Beatrice, didn't think much of her son's new appearance. It was the 1960s when many people were going for a grimy, unkempt look or a hippie style, so Beatrice refused to think it possible that her son's appearance was the result of an actual problem.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Like, do you know, when you have communication with someone, like, and especially when they're your family, like, you think...
You think,
know that
fair enough, you could
wrong,
try and
like,
excuse them changing how they look and stuff like that as being, like, the new trend.
Yeah.
But, like, can you not tell by their behaviour, the way they're acting and withdrawing and stuff like that?
Yeah.
But, anyway. At some point, I'm not entirely sure because I'm thinking it was either late 1968 or late 1969. But Chase started a job as a typist with the Retailers Credit Association, a job that he held for quite a bit of time, and Beatrice, his mother, said that his work was more than satisfactory. But then again, this is coming from the one who also says there's nothing wrong with her son.
Yeah, that's true.
Chase also started to consider going to college, which of course his parents encouraged, and he eventually enrolled at American River College, which is a public community college also in Sacramento, so at least he didn't really have to go far.
Yeah.
And I think he stayed on campus. Chase did... Oh, and obviously Richard Sr. and Beatrice were hopeful that their son was kind of, getting his life together, starting to do better. He was, wanting to go to college.
Getting out there, like.
Yeah. Chase did not do well in college. He lacked focus and could never decide on a career path. His grades were low and any enthusiasm he'd had for furthering his education was gone. Chase had stopped going to classes for a while, and I believe he called it a leave of absence or something like that. Something to something.
Yeah.
But, like, it wasn't a leave of absence because it wasn't approved by the college.
Oh.
So then he was expelled. So he had nowhere to live, so I'm assuming that he was living on campus, and being expelled meant also being evicted to make way for other students on campus. Chase was sitting outside on the stoop of a house when two women saw him, and one of them recognised him from high school. So the woman who'd gone to high school with him started a conversation with him, still thinking of Chase as the well-mannered, likeable guy that he was back in high school. The two women and Chase talked, and he told them about his situation, about being expelled, having nowhere to live, and the women were sympathetic, and the house he was actually sitting outside turned out to be theirs.
Oh my God.
So they invited Richard to move in, as they did have space for a third housemate, and of course Chase accepted the offer.
Yeah. As you would. Oh my God.
So Chase's parents... Chase's parents gave him rent money, so I'm assuming they were already giving him rent money all along for the college accommodation. So now he had his own room in the house with the two women. He could avoid telling his parents about getting expelled, but continue to get the money from them so that he could afford rent in this place.
Oh my God.
So he didn't have to tell them about college. However, Chase's drug problem had not improved, and he was still using cannabis and LSD. He was always high, which made it hard for his housemates to ever reason with him any time his behaviour became particularly baffling or concerning. Chase was consumed by paranoia. He believed that someone was after him and that he needed to get away to stop people from sneaking up on him. He boarded his bedroom door closed, made a hole in his closet wall, and then nailed the door of the closet shut from the inside. So I'm assuming in this instance he had locked himself in the closet for a while, otherwise how else would he nail it shut from the inside without being on the inside?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this is a moment where he literally locked himself inside, nailed it shut, and just looked out through the hole.
That's so scary.
Yeah. Chase was not able to keep a stable job. He would be up making noise at all hours of the day and night, and mostly night I think it was, and as anyone would, his housemates were getting fairly sick of his behaviour.
Yeah, definitely. You wouldn't live with that, like, especially when they were trying to go to college, like.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? They're trying to provide for themselves, make a life for themselves, and obviously his behaviour is at this moment from undiagnosed mental health issues, but still. Chase rarely cleaned himself, never did his own laundry, and this made him smell extremely bad.
I can't imagine.
No, yeah. At one point, when the women had some female friends over, Chase, who smelled foul, came out of his room naked and sat on the couch with the women. He attempted to start a conversation, but everything that came out of his mouth was incoherent.
Oh God.
Another time, when the women decided to throw a party, They were concerned about how Chase would act, obviously.
Yeah.
At first, everything seemed okay. However, as the night went on, Chase began to act up, getting down on the living room floor in the centre of the party, and he began moaning and making other incomprehensible noises. When the women had a party again another time, Chase's paranoia took control, and he spent the night leaning out of a window waving a gun at strangers who were passing. As you can imagine, Chase's housemates were terrified and knew they needed him out of the house. So when the time came and the women approached Chase about him leaving, he point-blank refused. He was like, no, not going. The women did not want to upset him, as they knew he had a gun in his possession, did not know what he'd be capable of, and they feared if they upset him that he'd attack them. So seeing as Chase would not leave, the two women packed up and they moved out instead.
Oh my god, that is actually
Chase was happy to be alone, and his obsession with blood and the human anatomy was only getting more and more intense, still convinced that he didn't have enough blood in his body. The time came for rent to be paid, and Chase couldn't afford it on his own, so then a brother of one of his prior housemates moved in, and Chase knew he had to be less hostile.
Yeah.
Chase's idea of less hostile, however, wasn't enough, and his new housemate was not as patient or scared of him like the previous housemates, and successfully kicked Chase out, making Chase homeless again and giving him no choice but to move back in with his parents. So now, remember, his parents had thought that this whole time Chase had been attending classes. So when he moved home, the truth came out that he was no longer in college.
Oh, they were not
You know,
happy,
they were
I'd say.
concerned and probably disappointed, but nonetheless they still wanted to help their son who clearly needed help.
Yeah.
Chase continued to resent his parents, and this grew more and more every day. He was convinced that his mother was trying to poison him and control his mind.
Oh god.
He put pictures of human hearts that he had cut out of anatomy books on his walls. Chase's desire for blood was insatiable. Now, in the time Chase was trying to live independently, his parents had separated again, so at this point he was only living with his mother.
Right.
Pixie, relax, girl. I don't know if the microphone picked it up, but one of the doggies is having a moment. So Chase continued to spiral, and with his parents providing for him, he saw no need to get a job. Although I doubt he would have been able to keep one had he got one anyway.
Yeah.
Now,
It's just kind of sad that they didn't notice, he had no independence, if that was me now, my nan would be like, get out and get a job, girl.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And even at that, she'd noticed that something was mentally not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, mentally not right.
Mentally not wrong.
Please. Occasionally he would work odd jobs, but his behaviour and drug addiction rendered it impossible for him to keep any odd job for more than a few days. Chase ended up with over $500 worth of parking tickets, but continued to drive around not faced with the legal consequences. Chase's mother paid all of his fines, but he still lost his licence and inevitably sold his Volkswagen, apparently for a motorcycle.
She's definitely one of them mums my little boy didn't do that.
It sounds like it anyway. Or else she's like, yeah, he did it, but he's a good boy, really.
Yeah,
Do you know? In 1972, Chase went on a 2-week trip to Utah. Same, but just not in 1972. It isn't clear what he did during his time there, but at some point in his trip he was arrested for more traffic violations and his car was impounded, so I'm assuming at this point he'd gotten another car.
Yeah, he must have.
Now Beatrice bailed him out and brought him home, but it wasn't long before she noticed that something about her son had changed while he was gone.
Oh my god, finally.
You know. Chase was as paranoid and antsy as always, but now he was plagued by even more bizarre beliefs. Chase claimed that something had happened in his cell that would affect him for his whole life. He told his mother that the police had poisoned him or asphyxiated him in some way that caused him to be severely physically ill. Now, in terms of police brutality, especially in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some truth to that, but also he's also constantly having delusions.
Yeah.
So it's a really hard one to figure out. But I'm not saying that there was police brutality involved, but I'm just saying historically it wouldn't be the first time something like that happened.
It could have set him off, something could have happened and it could have set him off and made it 10
Do you know,
times worse.
especially going back into the past, people of different races or sexualities or the mentally ill were not treated right at any point in time, really.
Yeah.
So, you know, he could be telling the truth, and then that made him believe that he was severely physically ill, and the physically ill part was the delusion.
Yeah.
Or the whole lot could have been the delusion. I don't know, I wasn't there. You know, like I said, it wasn't that year I went to Utah. I wasn't alive. But Chase now not only believed he didn't have enough blood in his body, but he also believed that his body was deteriorating rapidly, that his stomach was on backwards, and that his heart would stop beating from time to time.
Go to the doctor.
So Chase began to suffer from what his mother called fits. And these fits would be, I suppose I would more so refer to them probably as episodes.
Yeah.
He was always agitated and would hit his feet against the walls of their house. It got so bad that his ability to speak declined, and for a while he even lost the ability to write his own name.
Oh my god.
During the few times Chase could speak, he would argue with his mother, and at times their fights turned physical, so Beatrice then ended up having to send Chase to live with his father. Now, Chase's father didn't want to give up on his son and just believed that his son was misguided. Richard Sr. was doing renovations around the house, and Chase helped. And even when Chase worked alone on the house, he proved himself to be a competent handyman. But Chase still refused to get a job, saying he was still too weak from an illness that left his entire body numb. But yet you can do handiwork around the house. Do you know what I mean? That's all part of the delusion. Like,
confusing.
This caused Richard Sr. and Chase to argue constantly, and eventually Chase returned to live with his mother and sister. Like, this poor fella's getting fucked all over the place, left, right and centre. And this is only the start of it. He gets into LA at some point as well.
Oh my god.
We'll get to that. Now, Chase's sister Pamela was shocked by how skinny he had gotten. She thought he looked spooky and was disturbed by his actions. Chase was quick to anger, and he frequently threw violent tantrums. One time he got into an argument with his mother, and he attacked her while she tried to phone the police, hitting her over the head with the phone.
Oh my god.
When Chase realised the police were on the way, he jumped a fence and ran away, but it didn't take long for the police to catch him and bring him home, and Beatrice declined to press charges against her son.
Are we surprised?
No, we're not. Like, honestly, in the long run, with the way things unfolded, she would have been better off doing it, and maybe someone in the prison system might have noticed there's something mentally wrong with it, but then again, I'm
surprised nobody
back in those
took him
times.
to the doctor though, like, even when he got so skinny.
Yeah. Oh, and here we go. Eventually, Beatrice reached her limit again with Chase and reached out to her mother, Holly Neese, for help. So Chase was sent to Los Angeles to live with his grandmother and got a job as a school bus driver for developmentally disabled children under his uncle. So once again, Chase was too disorganised and messy. His performance at work was poor. He never washed his clothes or his hands, and he was fired after around a year, making it the longest job he held.
Surprised he lasted a year.
I was just about to say it. Now, unemployed again, he slept during the day and was up at night making strange noises. His grandmother was fed up and sent Chase back to Sacramento around Christmas time.
Oh my god.
Do you know, like, man's like a yo-yo.
Yeah, literally. Over and back.
It was not a festive holiday. With his parents divorced, he had to divide his time between Richard Sr. and Beatrice, and having to do this made him tense.
Yeah.
It would take quite a while before anyone could determine what was wrong with Chase, but he was deeply suffering from the effects of a severe mental illness, but we'll touch on that more in a bit. Chase felt alienated and alone, and all he wanted was relief from the anguish. Even though Chase's undiagnosed mental illness was worsening, he would go through times where his condition seemed to have improved. After returning from Los Angeles to live with his mother again, his strange behaviours seemed to have calmed down for a while. He became more social, and not only did he show interest in getting a job, he also started going out with friends again. So, you know, sounds good. However, these good periods never lasted long. Early in 1973, Chase began working at a local paint store. He worked there for just over a week before he quit. He had made enough money to purchase what he wanted. He could now afford to buy a .22 caliber pistol.
Oh, here we go.
On the 22nd of April 1973, Chase went to a small party that was at a friend's apartment. Now, he didn't interact much with anyone. He kind of stood at sidelines drinking out of a brown paper bag, like any alcoholic in a movie.
Yeah.
Chase noticed a young woman, the girlfriend of one of the men at the party, and he watched her closely, and when the other men went out to get more alcohol, he was left alone in the apartment with the woman.
Oh no, I'm scared.
Even if Chase couldn't sexually interact with a woman due to his erectile dysfunction, it didn't mean that he didn't desire them. With nobody around to stop him, he grabbed the woman and began to fondle and grope her breasts.
Oh, Jesus.
The woman stepped back and obviously told him to stop, but he ignored her. She rushed out of the room, but Chase followed in pursuit. Fortunately, it wasn't long before the woman's boyfriend and the other men got back, and she explained to them what Chase had done while they were away.
Yeah.
Obviously, the men were enraged and demanded that Chase leave.
Yeah.
Now, Chase's violent temper flared up, and he was almost screaming, saying that nobody had the right to tell him what he could or could not do.
No, they definitely do, though.
Like, sir, this is not your... Like, this woman is her own woman. She's not your woman.
Yeah.
And this apartment is not your apartment.
No, literally, you own none of this, like...
But anyway...
We can tell you, bestie.
You know, bestie. Well, we love a serial killer, us. But anyway, yeah, if he was going to... So nobody had the right to tell him what he could or could not do. If he was going to leave, it would be because he wanted to, and nobody could force him to do anything.
My God, this man was stubborn.
Yeah, Chase and the other men violently argued for about an hour before Chase seemed to have had enough, still furious, but he left the apartment. However, not long later, Chase.
I didn't
Checkmate.
even notice that.
Not long later, Chase was back looking for a pack of cigarettes that he'd left behind. As soon as he got inside the apartment, he was physically aggressive. A fist fight broke out, and while the men tried to subdue Chase, the small handgun fell out of Chase's pocket. and was on the floor just out of reach. Before Chase could grab it, another man got to it and threw it into the bedroom.
Thank God.
Get it away. Chase dared the men to call the police, stating he wasn't afraid. So the police came and took him away. Wait for this. Chase spent the night in county jail and was charged with a misdemeanor and fined $50.
Are you serious?
I'm like, should there not be some other charge there over the gun at least?
Yeah.
But anyway,
guns are still
maybe they never told the guards about the gun, the police about the gun though.
Probably, yeah.
Because I'm like, obviously I'm assuming he bought it legally, but like back then, like what was the story with gun permits and shit like that? Like,
oh yeah,
I know there's no like, I know there's like not much gun control in America,
yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Which is a bit ridiculous, but we won't go there. That's a political topic for another time. But like, surely he had to. But then again, maybe they were handing them out like not a bother back then. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not educated enough on guns
really
in America.
know, like, because they do kind of hand them out still. Like you can get them easy enough over there.
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, so maybe they just didn't know about the gun, or maybe it wasn't an issue for some reason. And I suppose it just fell out of his pocket. It's not like he took it out to use it as well.
Yeah. He wasn't pointing it in anyone's face yet, like.
Yeah, so after spending that night in county jail, the next day Richard Sr., Chase's father, picked him up from the county jail, but Chase denied he'd done anything wrong. Chase also claimed the police had been violent and seriously injured him again. You know? So I'm like, He wanted to sue, but his father talked him out of it. Once again unsure of how to deal with Chase, his parents sent him to his grandmother's in Los Angeles again.
Oh my God, the poor nan, like.
Poor Holly. Chase's grandmother Holly couldn't believe that Chase had gotten even worse. He was even thinner, as if he'd stopped eating almost entirely. His long hair was matted and greasy, and his beard clearly hadn't been shaved or tidied in a long time. A foul smell followed him everywhere, and he still made no effort to find a job, still slept all day and made loud noises at night. When he was asked what he was doing, he said he was building something for his car, which resulted in Chase blowing the power in his grandmother's living room and bathroom. And, yeah, the house was also covered in newspapers that he'd pull apart and leave all over the floor.
Oh, no.
Chase constantly told his grandmother that he was sick, but he could never specify with what. He suffered from constant headaches and a new pain in his leg. Chase believed his illness was due to a vitamin deficiency. So his solution was to wrap his head with a towel filled with slices of orange. He believed that the nutrients from the orange slices could soak into his head, and when that didn't work, he would stand on his head in the corner of his room to try and get the blood flowing back to his brain.
No.
I'm
no,
like,
that reminds me of.
But the thing is, I'm like, he was so delusional that he believed that would work. Yeah. Would you not just eat the orange?
No, like literally just eat it, please. It reminds me of do you remember when you were studying for like your junior cert, early cert, it's like, if I just sleep on the book, I wonder will the information
go in.
soak in.
Honestly. And try as we
No.
did, it didn't work. Just like the orange slices and the vitamin C. But I like how he was like, an orange will fix any vitamin deficiency I have. Like,
Vitamin C, actually no, it's just all of them at once.
Oh, where did I go? Oh yeah. It was during this time at his grandmother's house that a new symptom of Chase's undiagnosed and obviously untreated mental illness began to show. One night Chase's grandmother heard him having a conversation with someone, but nobody had called over, so he must have been having a conversation with himself.
Yeah.
"Richard, you're a good boy, aren't you?" he asked himself. "Yes, you're a good boy," he replied. You know.
Right.
Holly reached her limit when she found out that Chase had again bought a .22 caliber handgun. Because obviously I'm assuming the last one must have been left at that party.
Yeah.
Disturbed by Chase's purchase and behaviour, his grandmother sent him back to Sacramento only 2 months after he'd arrived.
Again.
Chase was now living with his father again, and Richard Sr. was not impressed with his son. Beatrice was trying to be understanding of her son and his obvious mental illness, but Richard Sr. believed that Chase was just lazy and misguided.
A bit of both.
Of what?
See, like, he's misguided, but it's at the same time it's not his fault, like.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's misguided because he's having mentally ill delusions.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like...
It's not like he has much help either. They're just
exactly, like
they're just sending him everywhere.
And it's literally like a
except
fucking
the
boomerang.
doctor.
It's like a boomerang. He's no sooner there and he's coming back. Yeah, except the doctor.
Yeah.
The one place.
You had one job.
Literally, like. But yeah, so in Richard Sr.'s mind, it was time that Chase man up and get a job. But I suppose back then as well, there was a very toxic thing about masculinity, and still to this day there can be with a lot of people, but especially back then, it would have been
Women do the cooking and the
rife
cleaning.
with
Like.
it, do you know.
Yeah.
And mental illness wasn't a thing that affected men. Do you know, as far as they were
Yeah.
concerned back then? Back then it was a case of, oh, you know, and if you're a woman, you cry, oh, you're hysterical.
Yeah.
Do you know,
Yeah.
if you're a man and you cry, you're a faggot.
Yeah.
You know,
actually,
you're not
it's
a
so
real
true,
man.
Though. It's like you're not a real man, like.
And obviously I'm only using that word because it's a slur against
Yeah.
the same sexuality with my sexuality, like,
Yeah.
so. Otherwise I wouldn't use it as an example at all. But like...
At all.
But yeah, you know what I mean? It's like, you're either less of a man or you're homosexual if you show emotion or show weakness.
Which
back
is actually
then.
sad, like.
But to this day, it's like
emotions.
generational, because to this day
Yeah.
there's still so many men that can't express emotions.
Yeah.
And trust me, I was one of them.
Yeah.
And I'm a gay one.
Yeah.
So, you know,
It's-
apparently I should have been allowed to be emotional and stuff, but that didn't work. And trust me, I'm making up for it. Ciao.
Ciao. Anyway.
Oh yeah, so Chase and Richard Sr. constantly bickered, even coming to blows at times. The tension of all this resulted in Chase moving back in with his mother.
Oh.
However, despite moving back to his mother's, neighbours of his father said that it was not uncommon to see Chase standing in the middle of his father's driveway, staring blankly at his father's house.
Reminiscing?
Something anyway.
Yeah.
Living back with his mother and sister wasn't easy either. They were afraid of him because of his violent outbursts and strange behaviour. Beatrice, nonetheless, was still committed to helping her son in every way except bringing him to a professional. Chase was still convinced... Did I say Case? Chase was still convinced that he was very physically ill and pleaded with his mother to take him to the doctor. But Beatrice wouldn't.
What age is he at this stage? Could he not have went himself?
I'm not sure, but I feel like... But he was financially reliant on his parents.
Oh, yes. Yes, that does.
That's it. Because I think I thought the same thing when I read it. I was like,
Yeah.
can you not go in there? But you're not without money, you can.
Yeah.
And it's America.
That's so true.
You know,
Oh my god.
I'm assuming healthcare was just as bad then.
Yeah, definitely.
Expenses-wise. On one occasion, Chase even called the fire department, because over there the ambulances are in the firehouses.
Yeah.
And told the operator he was suffering from cardiac arrest. When the fire trucks and ambulance arrived, they realised that Richard was perfectly fine and they refused to treat him. Now, one of the paramedics did sense that there was more going on than just a lie about cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
Chase genuinely believed he was going to die, even if every bit of evidence said the opposite.
Yeah.
So before the paramedic left, he did suggest to Beatrice that she should take her son to the hospital anyway.
Yeah.
Hello, Crow.
Please tell me she did.
Yes, finally.
Woo!
On the 1st of December 1973, Chase was admitted to the American River Hospital. When Dr. Irwin Lyons arrived to see Chase, Chase gave a list of ailments. He said his heart had stopped beating, his blood had stopped flowing, his kidneys stopped working, persistent stomachache and hernia, and that somebody had stolen his pulmonary artery.
I shouldn't have laughed.
I know, but like... It's,
How do we steal a pulmonary artery?
yeah. And how do you survive being robbed of your
Yeah.
pulmonary artery? But again, it's the delusion, which we'll cover in a second, actually, what they're called as well, that type of delusion. So all tests showed that there was nothing medically wrong with Chase, but this did not satisfy him. Dr. Lyons began to suspect that Chase was unwell, but with a mental illness. When Chase was asked if he heard voices or experienced hallucinations, he claimed he hadn't. Now, in terms of hallucinations, I've not heard anything yet so far to say he has.
Yeah.
But he must be hearing voices or something, considering his grandmother hearing him
talking to himself, yeah.
talking back and forth to himself. But then again,
Yeah.
he spoke both times. So that's not really a hallucination or hearing a voice, because he said out loud the question and then said out loud the answer.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know what you would call that. Obviously, it's not right frame of mind, but does that classify as hearing voices when that voice is your own? But anyway.
Yeah.
Chase then claimed that he had a brain aneurysm and needed to be put in the intensive care unit. Chase didn't want to answer any other questions about his sanity. Now, Chase's outlandish claims only convinced Dr. Lyons even more. Where did I go? Thank you. That Chase was mentally ill. So Dr. Lyons thought that Chase was likely suffering from chronic acute paranoid schizophrenia. The diagnosis would make sense, as not only did Chase have a disorganised lifestyle and strange beliefs, but he was also 23 years old at this point, and the typical age of the onset of schizophrenia symptoms start in men is around the late teens to early 20s. If it's onset, if it's early onset, that's the age. So Dr. Lyons had to consider that Chase's chronic drug use could have caused toxic psychosis, which could manifest the symptoms Chase was displaying also. While toxic psychosis would be the better of the two possibilities, as it would be temporary, it would still require Chase to be held for a minimum of 72 hours for observation in the psychiatric ward.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Now, as the medical staff were not aware of Chase's violent behaviour, he was not placed under careful confinement, and soon he left the hospital without permission. His mother Beatrice ended up bringing him back, but would not let him stay.
Oh.
Beatrice claimed that somebody had been bothering Chase and that she would deal with his issues at home. Because that's been going so well so far, hasn't it, sweetie?
Yeah, that's been working out really well for you. What are you going to do, fly him again?
Yeah. Obviously, the medical staff, tried to argue that it was in his best interest to be in the hospital, but Beatrice became hostile and provocative, and no, not provocative in the sexy way, in the causing anger deliberately way.
Oh. I was confused as well.
Dr. Lyons referred to Beatrice as the so-called schizophrenic mother.
Oh.
Whatever that means.
Right. Interesting.
Over the next few years, Beatrice brought Chase to numerous different doctors, one of which took a brain scan and an electrocardiogram. Once again, there was nothing physically wrong with Chase, even though he continued to say that his heart had stopped. In 1976, the same doctor recommended Chase for welfare, as his neurosis made it impossible for him to hold down a job. Chase was also given an oxygen tank, which was likely being used as a treatment for anxiety.
Yeah.
Once again, Chase went through another phase where he seemed to improve. He began to take better care of himself by exercising and eating better, but this period only lasted a few months before he began to abuse illegal drugs again, triggering his psychotic symptoms. This time, however, he was more violent than he'd ever been.
Oh no.
Chase terrorised his mother and sister. More than once his sister Pamela fled from the house during his tirades. Beatrice would also run in fear as Chase destroyed everything inside the home. He slapped his mother so hard that she would be knocked to the ground. He kicked holes in the walls of the house, broke windows, knocked doors off their hinges. And when Beatrice tried to call Richard Sr. for help, he arrived at the house to find Chase pulling the phone and all of its wires out of the wall.
Oh my God.
Chase was also having one-sided conversations with someone who wasn't there. Beatrice overheard him repeating the same phrases, "Oh, shut up," or "I'm not going to do it."
Oh no.
At first she thought that Chase was talking to her and would answer him, but every time he insisted he was talking to someone else.
Oh.
So obviously the symptoms are worsening.
Way worse.
Chase, like in the past, believed again that his mother was controlling his mind and trying to poison him, so he stopped eating the food that she would make. The milk began to taste weird, and when Pamela tasted it, she realised that her brother was adding washing up liquid, or dish soap, as I think it's called in America, to it. So
my gosh.
Yeah, that's why it was tasting weird. Chase then claimed that Pamela was also trying to control him.
Oh, great.
Now, the severe stress from everything then triggered Beatrice's mental disturbances. Beatrice noticed that her son was prone to having his most violent outbursts after speaking with his dad, Richard Sr., on the phone, and she became convinced that her ex-husband was commanding Chase to break things and attack her.
Oh, here.
Chase's disturbing childhood hobby of torturing animals returned. So trigger warning for that one.
Stress.
At a later time, using a pocket knife, Chase would poke and cut the paws of the family dog.
No.
At a later time, this was bad. He grabbed the dog and held it by the snout, squeezing so hard that the dog could not escape from his grip. Chase held on until that part of the dog's skull almost cracked. For some time following this, the dog struggled to eat solid food.
Oh my God, no.
Beatrice once again had enough of dealing with Chase and his violent behaviour. And even though Beatrice had her delusions about her ex-husband, she called him anyway to come and help stop Chase when yet another incident occurred. Paranoid and furious, Chase got into a fist fight with his father outside his mother's house. So Richard Sr. and Beatrice had no idea how to deal with Chase. Desperate and worn out, they did something that is kind of unthinkable, and you definitely wouldn't hear now. They searched for an apartment for Chase to live in on his own. Now, I'm sorry, but would you not try to commit him before you'd even consider letting him live alone in that condition?
Bring him back to the hospital, they were literally begging for him
you
to
know,
stay in.
when the hospital wanted to keep him for the 72-hour observation, you wouldn't let them, Beatrice. I don't think the hospital would say no.
No, literally, girl.
When they know. But anyway, this has unintentionally turned into a two-parter. So that draws to a close the end of part 1. So, yeah.
That's
Join
all,
us
folks.
for the next
Bye.
episode, which will kind of go into more detail of him living alone, further institutionalizations, murders, so on and so forth. Thank you for listening. And thank you for joining, Lorena.
Peace out.
Yeah. So, are you traumatized enough yet?
Traumatized, yeah.
Going to traumatize you even more in the next part.
Can't wait. I'm so excited.
Trauma who? But yeah, no, it really is an awful case though, and we haven't even got to the worst of it, to be honest. So once again, guys, thank you very much for listening, and join in next week for the next episode. Love you. Bye.
Bye.